Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Vanessa here with you today on Facebook Live. Just wanted to bring up Brio Bingo, Brigo, that we're still playing in case anyone's dropped the ball. The contest is still on until the end of June, Father's Day to be precise. That is on the 21st. So don't miss out on the opportunity to win some great prizes, including some immune fortifying IVs. There's 3 of those that we're giving away, and you get an entry for each line that you complete for up to 3 entries. And if you do a blackout Brigo, then you get 5 whole entries. So this is my first Facebook Live, not in the other room, and there's going to be a lot going on here. I'm going to try to demonstrate a few recipes on iron enhancing remedies that you can make at home, hopefully from things that you already have to make it more convenient. So starting off, if you found your way to this talk, you probably already know that you have iron deficiency anemia. Usually your ferritin value will be low. Regular anemia is just when your blood count is low. So making dietary changes and taking herbal or nutritional supplements usually help regardless of the cause. But iron supplementation is not universally beneficial. In fact, too much iron can be toxic and inflammatory. So for a group of people who are at an increased risk of having iron deficiency anemia, I'm going to include that in my summary for this talk, because I think we all want to move on to the hands-on component. And you can find that summary on Brio's website if you don't know about that already. So iron, why it's important is that it is a component of hemoglobin, and that's the protein in red blood cells that help transport oxygen to the rest of the body from lungs. It's used throughout our systems for cell function, for growth, and in some cases, hormone production. A really important hormone related to iron, which you may not have heard of, is hepcidin. This is the main iron hormone, and it controls the absorption of iron from food and how it's distributed to the rest of the body. So the more hepcidin you have, the less iron you absorb. And it's been shown in studies, it's a more recent finding that people who supplement iron multiple times a day, thinking that it's increasing absorption, actually have been found to have higher hepcidin values. So therefore, the more iron that your body is receiving, the less it can actually absorb. And so one practical tip is just to take your iron every second day, or even 3 times a week. So don't beat yourself up if you forget to take your iron pills every day. It actually may have a beneficial effect overall. And then again, if you do have iron deficiency anemia, you are probably already aware of the classic symptoms of low iron, which include fatigue, weakness, pallor or pale face, cold hands and feet, lightheadedness, shortness of breath, brittle nails and hair as well, and something called pica, which is a craving for non-foods, typically ice and dirt. And I suspect it might have something to do with actually the mineral content in dirt. As we will soon get into, a lot of the iron-rich foods that are not animal-based are actually grown very close to the ground, meaning that they're root vegetables. So we often are told, you know, the best sources of iron are meat, particularly red meat and calf liver. They are the best sources of heme iron or animal iron. They also happen to be great sources of B12 in case you also have a B12 deficiency or pernicious, also known as megaloblastic anemia. In terms of a plant-based diet, the best source that people often think of is beans, especially pinto beans. Moving on to more leafy things, beets. In particular, the beet greens have been shown to be a wonderful source of iron, and cooking them actually almost triples the iron content. It decreases some of the compounds that impede iron absorption. And then further on, these things are kind of in decreasing amounts of iron. Almond brewer's yeast, I find that a lot harder to find than like a bread type of yeast. I haven't been able to get my hands on that yet. And then green leafy vegetables, and finally, one of the focuses today, which will be blackstrap molasses. So for our first recipe, I'm going to show you how to do an herbal iron elixir. And what it involves is blackstrap molasses, and this is the process of sugar cane refining. It's a byproduct. So on the first boil, you get like a light molasses. On the second boil, you'll get a darker product, and then finally, you'll get blackstrap molasses. And it has the most minerals and nutrients, but it also happens to be the least sweet. In fact, it's quite bitter, especially when we hear the word molasses. Molasses has been nicknamed a pregnancy tea because not all herbs are safe in pregnancy, and pregnant women do have higher nutritional needs. So a pregnancy tea of blackstrap molasses is simply 1 tablespoon, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day is usually enough, dissolved in a bit of hot water. And I like the taste. It might take some getting used to. Not only is it high in iron, it's also rich in B vitamins and some other minerals like magnesium that we can always use more of. So just a disclaimer before we get into the recipes is that herbs or medicinal plants are in many cases also food sources. But because of the methods of extracting in herbal medicine making, it can really increase the concentration of the herbal constituents. So those are the active beneficial compounds we're after. And so this warrants caution in various medical conditions. And I want to highlight pregnancy because that might be one of the reasons why you have anemia in the first place if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So anytime you start a new treatment, no matter whether it's natural or not, it's always best to consult your healthcare practitioner. This recipe, I'm going to steep some herbs. So these are going to be maca. So I've got that here. Where did it go? It is. We've got this red maca. It happens to be organic, and there's a few different kinds of maca. There's red, yellow, and black. If you heard anything about maca, it's probably either that it's a good source of iron or that it can enhance sexual function. And that's specific to the red kind. And you always want to find a gelatinized maca. because that form is the best absorbed and easiest to digest. Maca is a root vegetable. We're also going to put kelp, another source of iron. This one happens to be from Atlantic Canada. And other things you could use, which I just didn't happen to have, are yellow dock or ashwagandha. And another key ingredient is going to be nettle leaf. Got that here. And if you happen to be into wild harvesting and foraging, it's still a good time to go out and harvest nettle right now. But be careful. The full common name is stinging nettle. So it does have these little fuzzy looking needles that can cause like a rash or a burning sensation, and it will subside, but just caution when you're going out to find your own nettles. Just gonna double check my recipe so that I don't misinform anyone. Okay, so if I were using roots, which I'm not, the alternate version has ashwagandha and yellow dock, I'd want to decoct those. So that's like making a tea, except you would simmer it. You'd bring it to a boil and simmer it for about 20 minutes. But since we're using powdered or just light cut herbs, we can move on. And I'm going to put the nettle in about 1.5 cups of hot water. I've boiled it ahead of time. Okay, and I don't know if you can quite see it. Let's see if I can show you. Okay, so here's a slightly different view. So here I have, I've got kind of a double boiler system going. I have an older set of pots, and I'm not sure about the coating on them. Usually you don't want your herbs in contact with anything metal, because, especially heavy metals or aluminum, because it can leach into whatever you're making, and you want to avoid that. So stainless steel is fine. Just to be on the really safe side, and because I don't have to decoct, I just used a glass bowl, and I'm going to put my nettle in. And that's going to be 2 tablespoons. And then I'm pouring over 1.5 cups of freshly boiled water. Anytime you're doing medicine making, I recommend using the best quality water you can find, because you're taking it as a treatment, not just for hydration. Okay, and then I'm going to add a tablespoon each of the kelp powder and the red maca. You'll notice that I'm not measuring. The precise amounts aren't too important, especially because you're not going to be taking all of this at one time. So it's called red, but if you can see there, it's more of a sandy yellow color. The benefit of using powdered herbs is that you won't need to filter them afterwards. So I'm going to give that a stir, and then I'm going to cover it and let it sit for about 10 minutes while we do the next thing. Going back to nettle, a basic tea that you can do for enhancing iron stores is nettle, good old nettle. And it's also high in vitamins like A, C, and K. Vitamin C or anything that's acidic will increase your body's absorption of iron. Vitamin K is also involved in clotting. One cause of iron deficiency in women could be a heavy menses. So it helps in clot formation and stye any excess bleeding. So for a basic cup of nettle tea, I would use about 2 teaspoons of nettle to a cup of water. And so I'm gonna get that started and show it to you at the end, and so you can see the really bright, beautiful green color. Nettle tea is generally pretty safe. I will try to put any contraindications or cautions to the use of any of the herbs mentioned in this video in this summary. It's just a bit too much to mention it all and disclose everything as I'm showing how to do it as well. And just to make sure I don't forget anything that's important. Okay, and we're gonna pour over the water. You could also do an overnight cold infusion. So the hot water just speeds it up, but you could just put regular room temperature water and just let it sit overnight. If there's any mucilage in the tea, a prime example is marshmallow tea. It can also get gummy. And so the cold infusion is better so it doesn't get too gelatinous. I would say the same thing with maca. Okay, so for herbal teas as opposed to just a regular drinking tea, I would always encourage you to use a close-fitting lid, and that will capture all the essential oils, the volatile oils, and the vapors, because why we make things in teas is that there's water-soluble constituents, and so we don't want to lose any of the medicinal compounds. Put a lid on that. And if you don't have anything that is a direct match, I have used plates before when I've been traveling, where these silicone mug covers work really great too. Okay, so we've got the herbal iron elixir. The final step is adding the Blackstrap Molasses. I'm just going to set a timer so I don't forget about it. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is an herbal vinegar. So vinegar, all on its own, is great if you tend to be low on iron because it helps extract minerals from your food. So you could technically make a vinegar with eggshell or bone. If you've ever noticed that bone broth recipes often ask for you to add a bit of acid, whether that's lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, or tomato, it's to really help pull all the nutrients from the bone. And you'll often find that afterwards the bones are a little bit floppy, and it's because it's lost the structure from the minerals because they've ended up in your healing broth. For any herbal vinegar, I would just recommend using basic apple cider vinegar. It's generally inexpensive. You can get pasteurized or the raw one with the mother. And some recipes will suggest that you heat the vinegar first. I don't think that's necessary, and I do kind of want the benefits of the mother. I don't want to boil the mother to her demise. So I'm just going to use it at room temperature. Of course, a little bit of heat will help speed up the extraction process, but it does take a minimum of 2 weeks to up to 6 weeks, so you have to wait anyways. Heating also will destroy any microbes potentially in the plant matter you're using, but on the other hand, you're creating a low pH acidic environment, and I think that will go a long way in killing anything that doesn't get cleaned away beforehand. So for an herbal vinegar, I'm going to be a bit experimental today. I haven't done all of these beforehand. So I'm going to use smaller containers in case I don't love it. Let's see if I can show you here. So I've got some brown bottles just reused from supplements and clear. The ones with a neck are convenient just for dispensing afterwards, but these ones with a wider mouth will be better for stuffing your herb in. So you can do it with fresh or dried herbs. And if you're going to do fresh, I would try to clean them in advance and have them as dry as possible. Anytime you're introducing water, there's just a greater chance for microbial growth. So general rule, normally for cooking, a fresh herb, you would use 3 to 4 times the amount called for dry because it's less concentrated as fresh. For an herbal vinegar, you want not to have any oxygen in here because that can also encourage the growth of microbes. And so you want to actually pretty much fill it to the shoulder of the container, no matter what you're using, and then just top the rest off with vinegar. You want all the plant matter to be really well submerged. So the two that I wanted to show you were parsley and lemongrass. In traditional tincture making, you don't want to combine multiple herbs in one tincture. You want to make them separately and then mix them at the end to customize your formula. But in this case, these are all kind of water extractable and they don't require different concentrations of alcohol. Usually you want to pick an alcohol, whether it's 30% or 90%, that really matches the compound that you're trying to extract, like resins and anything that's kind of harder, like a bark or a tough, like a poplar bud, would require higher alcohol concentration compared to lighter leafy green matter. Okay, so I'm going to do one with dry and one with fresh and compare how they turn out. I will try to report on that in a few weeks. Funnel always helps. So I'm just pouring the parsley in. And if you get a bottleneck, I would just tap it in. And that also ensures that it's very well packed. So originally I had almost this full container worth of parsley. And now that I've let it settle, this is only about half full. And if you want to be really professional, what you can do is actually weigh the proportion of your dry and wet ingredients so that you can figure out the concentration or the ratio. So I'm just going to do that here. It's my scale. So I'm tearing the weight of the container. It's the same size as the one I filled with the parsley. So I've got 1.5 grams of parsley. I'm just noting that. And then the other thing I'm going to add is lemongrass. And why I picked parsley and lemongrass is that parsley actually has more iron than spinach. You know, Popeye really misled a lot of us to think that spinach is one of the best sources of iron. And it's not bad. In terms of leafy green vegetables, like collards and kale are also decent sources. But what they have is they're high in oxalates, and that impedes the absorption of iron. And so you're not getting as much as you really should from those dark leafy greens. Okay, so I'm tearing this again, and I'm adding this time some lemongrass. In hindsight, I should have put the lemongrass in first and then poured the parsley around it, just for a better fit. So you do, again, want this container packed fairly full. And then again, I'm noting how much lemongrass I put in, so about 3 grams. And then the amount is not important, it just happens to be what I fit into the container, so that I'll know for the future how strong it is. So again, just tapping so that it settles, so I can get the lid in. Sorry if this noise is hurting your ears. I'm not sure if it's picking up. Okay. There we go. And then I'm tearing that again, and I'm going to pour in the vinegar. I'm just making sure that all my herbal matter is covered. Okay. So this morning, as I was getting ready, I couldn't find the lids to all my containers. And if that happens to you, it's not a problem. You don't want to use a metal lid if you're using something like mason jars. If you have plastic lids, that's better because the vinegar will rust it. I'll show you some examples of where this has happened. My last herbal vinegar, actually, the hole rusted all the way through, even though I had multiple layers of wax paper. And so that is the alternative, to just cut multiple small pieces of wax paper and use an elastic band. So put that on and then just get an elastic band to secure it. Okay, so there we've got one done. And I heard the beep of our herbal iron elixir with the molasses go off, so we'll go back to that for now. So the water in the double boiler on the bottom is just on a low heat. And now I'm going to add the molasses, and that's going to be 500 grams of Blackstrap molasses. So that's pretty much the rest of this container. After we add it, we're just going to let it heat gently so it is all integrated for about 10 to 15 minutes. It looks kind of like rusty water right now. So the molasses is still slowly trickling out of the container. I'm going to try to get every last drop. Don't want to keep you waiting too long, so that's good enough for now. I'm putting the lid back on. Give it multiple good stirs. And so molasses kind of keeps indefinitely like honey, but because we've added water again, that will decrease the shelf life. So once this is cooled, I don't need to strain it or anything because we started with powdered herbs that will fully dissolve. I'll just wait for it to cool and then transfer it into a clean container and keep it in the fridge. And then how to take that is just about a tablespoon per day, and then you can add it to your granola, to your smoothies, to anything you're eating. You might not enjoy the taste of it, and that would help mask it, or it might even enhance the taste of your food, depending on your palate. Okay, I'm just checking in on our nettle tea here. I'll strain it before I show you. So the method for the fresh parsley would be very much the same. I'm not going to bother demonstrating that for you, just for the sake of time. But I do have a combination here of Italian flat leaf parsley and curly parsley. The guides never really specify about which parsley you're talking about. I can try to find out if there really is a difference. I personally prefer the taste of the flat leaf parsley. It's not the most bold herb, so I think that will give it a bit more of a punch, especially competing with the vinegar. Just going to check my notes to see if there's anything else that I thought was really important to mention. So this talk is called simple herbal teas, vinegars, and elixirs for iron deficiency. And ironically enough, regular tea, like black tea, green tea, are rich in tannins and certain polyphenols that decrease the absorption of iron. So it's actually really herbal teas or tisanes that you would actually get iron from. And iron cookware can really help if you have cast iron to in a good way, leach into your food. And through iron cookware, you're probably getting the same amount of iron that you would from a supplement. So it's completely safe. And something new that I discovered is it's a Canadian product. It's called the Lucky Iron Fish. And it is a substitute actually for iron cookware. Here is the little fish here. And how it works is you add 2 to 3 drops of acidity, and again, that can be vinegar or lemon juice in the pot with whatever liquid thing you're cooking and the iron fish, and you boil that liquid for about 10 minutes, and then you remove it. And that acid just helps release iron from the fish. And I forgot how long this lasts for, but with regular use, let's see if it says here. It doesn't say, but I remember it being something really impressive, like it's a wide range, I'll find out for sure, but somewhere between 2 and 10 years, depending on how often you cook with it. So that's a neat tool. You know, iron cookware can be hard to maintain, so I really like that as an alternative. And then in terms of other things that are high in iron that you might not have thought about, one thing is moringa powder. So moringa leaf powder. And you know a good quality moringa leaf when it's this bright green. If you see something that looks like kelp powder, that's a lower quality moringa. And someone once told me that moringa has, you know, vitamin A through Z in it. And I thought that was an overstatement, but I looked into it, and it actually is one of the most nutritious foods in the world. It has a broad spectrum of vitamins and minerals. It's kind of like a plant multivitamin, multi-mineral. And just to illustrate, 100 grams of moringa powder. So you wouldn't want to probably eat that much in a day. I would just say a tablespoon or so in a smoothie is good enough for most people. But 100 grams of moringa has 28 grams of iron. And if you were to guess, how much iron do you think 100 grams of beef has? So one of those really top sources of heme iron. Well, it's actually 2 milligrams only. 2 milligrams compared to 28 milligrams from a plant source. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that is a wrap, I think. Again, it's Dr. Vanessa, and thank you so much for joining me today and bearing with me with this new experiment. We're going to be transitioning to a new format with the Brio Facebook Lives in the upcoming weeks, probably as we transition back into in-clinic visits and start converting some of those telemedicine appointments so that we can get back to doing things like bodywork, acupuncture, massage, Bowen, and seeing patients in person that we really need to. We're going to continue offering this, but perhaps just at a decreased frequency and try some different things, not just structured talks, but maybe demos and some maybe interviews with each other. So feel free to make suggestions. We always love hearing feedback to see what you want more of and what we could do differently. So thanks again for joining me today for Simple Herbal Teas, Vinegars, and Elixirs, and look for the article on Brio's website in the next couple weeks with all the details in case you missed any.